Welcome to the Energy Capital Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Lewin. Well, actually, this week, I'm not the host. I'm the guest. For this year's Texas Energy Summit, a previous guest on the show, Becky Klein, former chair of the Public Utility Commission, asked me if we could turn the tables and she would interview me live at the Texas Energy Summit. We followed a great panel of legislators talking about energy policy and then a keynote from PUC Chair Thomas Gleason, also a previous guest of the show. So we were all teed up to tackle a wide range of energy topics, which we did in a fast-paced 30 minutes. We, of course, got into the challenges of grid reliability, the opportunities of energy efficiency, distributed energy resources, and even my advice for young leaders getting into the energy field. I was honored that such a great thinker and doer as Becky wanted to interview me, and I truly enjoyed the discussion. As always, I look forward to hearing your feedback on the episode. As always, like, share, and please leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. It really does help people find the Energy Capital Podcast, and I deeply appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoy the episode.
So I've been looking forward to this. This is the highlight of my week, to share the stage with you and learn from you. And so I think Chair Gleason set us up so well, didn't he? Because he said, we need to talk more about energy efficiency and demand response and affordability. And voila, here you are with customer side solutions. So we have a lot to talk about in these short 30 minutes, and we can't wait to pick your brain. And so glad we could turn the tables on you and have the Doug Lewin on Doug Lewin podcast show.
So now I got to be on the hot seat. It's more fun to ask the questions, but
is it?
Yeah. You're about to find out. Yeah.
I'm going to start a little bit, just kind of cliff notes on Doug Lewin and who Doug Lewin is and how Doug Lewin got here, because you've had an illustrious career already, and you're just getting started, no doubt, warming up. And so you've gone from the legislature to Spear to Clear Result and standing up your own company, Stoic, and doing this energy podcast and the newsletter on behalf of the industry. So what got you interested in power industry?
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for doing this, Becky. I do hope anybody listening to the podcast or in the live audience does go back, if you haven't already, and listen to the interview with Becky, because she's a real wealth of knowledge and tons of experience. I'll learn a lot from you and appreciate that very much. So I actually, in what seems like a past life at this point, was a teacher a long time ago. I'm actually teaching again, and some of my students are here. I get to teach at the LBJ school at UT, so kind of going back to my roots. But I was a teacher, and I was very interested in education policy, and I did an internship here under the dome at the Capitol, and really just fell in love with the legislative process. I know it's crazy. I think there's probably something wrong with me, but I really did. I love the environment. I love the energy. I love the intellectual stimulation. I love the, how power works and the horse trading that goes on and all that stuff. And really just kind of fell in love with it. And then started to work in the building and was working on air quality issues, actually. So this is going back a ways. I'm kind of getting up there in years at this point. So this was back in like 05, 06, 07. In that period, we still have, as we were just talking about earlier at this conference and throughout this conference, non-attainment issues, air quality issues. And that was something I was working on a lot. And you don't work on air quality issues for too long before you start to realize that renewable energy and energy efficiency, electrification of whether it's industry, heat, transport, these are the kind of core solutions that are really going to help make the air cleaner. So sort of throughout the course of my career, as I got hired into different offices, energy and power just became more and more what I did. And after a while, I wasn't working on education anymore. But now I'm back and teaching, so that's fun.
And working on education, yeah. Both in the classroom and on the podcast. So one of the things I've noticed in listening to various different podcasts that you have, so many diverse voices, not only from Texas, but also outside of Texas as well, is you often ask the guests, what is their vision, especially if they're Texans, what is their vision for the power market here in Texas? And I'd like to ask you, what is your vision? What is your dream? But also, if you can tag onto that, how realistic and probable is that dream over the course of the next 5 years?
Yeah, see, it's so much easier to ask the questions than the answer. It's so easy to ask that question to my guests, and now I realize what kind of pain I'm causing them. It's interesting. I asked that question to Pablo Vegas, the CEO of ERCOT, and the first thing he answered was, I think in 5 to 10 years, we're going to see there's just distributed generation all through the system, a lot of decentralization of power, lots of small sources all over the place generating. I share that vision. I do think that is the way the market's going. I think in a 5 to 10 year time period, I am, for those who are listening to the podcast after the fact, we just heard from Chairman Gleason in the room. I also did a podcast with him, which you can go back and listen to, but I think he's doing a lot of the right things. And one of the things, the Public Utility Commission now, under his leadership, but also with Commissioner Kovos, Commissioner Gladfelty, they've really put a focus on transmission. And I do think in a 5 to 10 year period, we're going to see a lot more transmission built out, which will help us integrate a greater diversity of resources, which will help lower costs and allow Texas to be the engine for growth for our country and for the world that it's been for a long time. If we want to keep going that way, we need to have more transmission. We need to have a whole lot more generation of so many different kinds, including wind and solar and storage. I think we're going to see continued growth of those resources. I am also, I'm pretty bullish on particularly geothermal. I think we'll see some geothermal development in the state. I don't know that I'm yet bullish on nuclear. I'm bullish on, if it's gonna happen, it'll probably happen here in Texas. There's just a report out this week, the week we're recording, that the Advanced Nuclear Working Group put out with some pretty concrete steps for how Texas could lead that. So I think that's part of it. And then, of course, I would, it wouldn't be me if I didn't say, I think, in a 5 to 10 year time frame, we're also going to see a whole lot of energy efficiency and really just reducing. There's so much waste in the system right now. There's just so much waste in the system. We could talk more about that, but, there are very good ways to get after that waste that increase our grid reliability, lower costs for customers, and make them more comfortable and safe and healthy inside their homes. So just a core solution, just to name one, right, is heat pumps, right? Getting the chairman was talking about this, resistance heat, which is driving up our winter peaks, getting the HVAC system switched over to these efficient heat pumps that can lower costs, really help handle that winter peak, which is what a big part of Winter Storm Uri was about. And because they're multi-speed, they can actually respond to a signal, pre-cool a home when there's plenty of power, the sun's up, we got lots of solar power, and then ramp down in the evening without any sacrifice of comfort to that customer, right? We have to get, I think that's another thing in 5 to 10 years, like in that time frame, we're going to move away from this sort of narrative of like, you have to sacrifice in order to be part of what's going on with clean energy. Electric vehicles are more fun to drive. Heat pumps will actually make you more comfortable in your house while you're saving money, not less, right? There's just a long list of ways that the energy transition, this energy expansion, whatever you want to call it, that we're in right now, is going to make our quality of life better too.
So that is a really nice, clear vision of what can happen here in Texas. And given the fact that I maintain we still have the vestige of the Texas wildcatter spirit that we can put to work, particularly in this area of energy efficiency and demand response, where we individual residents can be a part of that solution.
Yep.
What, in your mind, is some of the main barriers and stumbling blocks to get that done?
Specifically on energy efficiency? Yeah. So, I mean, to me, this is one of those things that is like, I know I don't want to be reductive and like oversimplify it. It is complicated, and energy efficiency is hard for a lot of reasons. But I do think in some ways it's kind of simple. And if the state of Texas, if Chairman Gleason and legislative leaders that want to tackle this problem and make sure that we don't have another Winter Storm Uri, could really focus in on it really, I think, comes down to HVAC, insulation, and thermostats, and probably in that order. And on HVAC, the basic math is this, right? Your AC is probably going to last 15 years on average, right? So you have a 7% turnover every single year. 7% of ACs are going to need to be replaced every single year. At the moment when those need to be replaced, the customer has to make a decision, right? When does the AC usually break? Right in the middle of like a hot summer day, right? That's or in the winter when it's very, very cold, right? Extremes are going to cause things to break more. They're going to call their AC contractor. The AC contractor is going to say, I've got these base model, SEER 14 units in stock. You can have that today, or you can wait a week for the high efficiency unit. Everybody's buying the 14 SEER. I'm buying the 14 SEER, right? I'm not living in a house that's 100 degrees for the next week, right? So you need to have midstream programs, get the distributors to stock the high efficiency heat pumps, then do an analysis, figure out what the delta of the cost, and it's going to vary by region, and it might vary over time, so it has to be a little bit dynamic, but bring that delta down. And if you can get it down to zero or close to zero, where now the customer is given a choice, you can have the less efficient system for X dollars, or the more efficient system for the exact same amount of dollars, also available the same day. Now you've made it very easy for customers. Get that resistance heat out at the same time, put that heat pump in, and again, the customer wins on that. Like if we're talking about customer side solutions, you have to create situations where the customer wins while the grid wins, right? The customer is not, while we all may be like altruistic and want things to work out, we can't make our decisions based on the overall grid. People just aren't going to do that. It's not a realistic expectation. So make it easy for them to make the right choice that also benefits the grid. Like that is, I think, the biggest barrier is just people aren't able to get the equipment because it's not there. And even if they are, the cost delta is high. And just, the vast majority of people just don't have the money, the luxury to say, I'm going to put $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 towards a more efficient system. So equalize that.
So we heard earlier Representative Donna Howard say how she hoped that, this market, which we're many of us so proud of, but also it's a very complicated market.
Yeah.
It's a very dynamic market. And she was saying, can you make things palatable for me so that I understand how all the different stakeholders are being impacted? With that said, do you think that the PUC has the authority to institute some of these demand response energy efficiency activities, or do you think legislation is going to be needed to effectuate this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think they do have the authority to do it. The PUC used the authority in 2010 to increase energy efficiency programs. So if you go back, the energy efficiency programs in Texas were created in 1999, as you know, right, during the restructuring bill, Senate Bill 7. They were increased with a bill that was passed in 2007, House Bill 3693. Anybody wants to look it up? That doubled it. That was during the period I was working here. And then they tried to increase it in 2009. That did not get across the finish line, but then the PUC on their own volition increased the goal. It was a pretty big increase. It was a 50% increase in the size of the goal. The legislature then came in and put that into statute during the next session, which was 2011, when there were outages. There were rolling outages in the winter of 2011, February 2011, and the legislature was like, yeah, we need to really make sure that what was done at the PUC gets into law, so it's really there and it's solid. So the PUC has that authority. I do think, Becky, there are bigger questions that should be asked about. I mean, I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this too. It's like we need to increase the utility programs, and maybe we do. I think we actually do, but I think we also need to back up a step and say, what is the end, right? What is the goal we're after? If the goal that we're after is people having more energy efficient homes, less of a strain on the grid, right? Less energy wasted, lower power bills. Are there other ways to get at that? Chairman Gleason was talking about how there used to be a fund at the PUC that was never funded. Like you could have statewide programs, right? There are federal dollars that are anticipated to be coming to the state to focus on energy efficiency through the State Energy Conservation Office. Can we monitor those? And if those go well, maybe the State Energy Conservation Office does more of this. Those could all be bad ideas. I think the point is we need to figure out, like, what is the goal? What is the end state we're trying to get to? And then talk about multiple different options to get there. I think utility programs, which the PUC has clear authority over, is one of those, but not the only one.
So give us quickly where some context of where we are now, because you described the incremental increases in energy efficiency, but I think we both know that the story really isn't a very good story in Texas with where we are, despite all that with energy efficiency. So put a little context on that for our listeners and audience.
No, I appreciate that. And look, I mean, where I just left that story was 2011. The legislature, put into statute what the PUC had done. That's kind of it. Like, the story kind of ends there. We're in 2024, almost 2025. It's been 14 years. There has been no major energy efficiency legislation. There have not been increases in the utility energy efficiency programs. The funding will go up and down depending on some ways that the goal is calculated, so people can quibble with this. But basically, we've been flat for 13, 14, 15 years.
And we're in the lowest quartile nationally on energy efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, we actually, we're in the bottom. So it depends on the utility programs. Yes, there are 27 states that have an energy efficiency goal. We're dead last of the 27 states that have a goal. Our score is like somewhere right in the middle, like 25th or 27th, because we actually do okay on energy codes and on like public sector programs that are administered through the State Energy Conservation Office, the Lone Star Loan Program. So there's other things we do on energy efficiency that are pretty good. But as far as the end use residential customer having access to just what I was talking about before, right? Like a rebated incentive to make that decision between a very high efficiency HVAC system, a high efficiency all climate heat pump versus sort of the usual conventional thing with resistance heat as a backup that's going to strain the grid. Like, those programs are quite low. So this really is an area that needs a lot of attention. Whenever you talk about the grid, you have two sides of the coin, right? You've got supply, you've got demand. And, we're recording in the Texas Capitol. The conversation in this building has been highly, heavily weighted towards supply with very little emphasis on demand. And it is time to bring that one up.
Because our title of this segment is Customer Side Solutions, besides energy efficiency, demand response, there's some exciting new technology on the distribution grid now. And I wonder how you think about a lot of the focus going on towards the large load demand growth and meeting that with transition, but thinking also about the smaller distribution grid and its prospective evolution. What do you see as some of the, really important technologies that are behind yours and my meter in the future? It can really help both resiliency, affordability, and sustainability.
Yeah, I think there's so many. And this is really, really key, right? There's a lot of discussions around how do we actually value these resources. Let's talk about what they are, right? I mean, the obvious ones would be like solar and storage, right? You can definitely talk about EV charging, right? We're up over 325,000 electric vehicles in Texas. But certainly when you're talking about behind the meter resources, you're also talking about the loads inside the home, everything from the HVAC, right, which is the most obvious. We were just talking about the heat pump can receive a signal, pre-cool, right, throttle back during that time when the sun is going down. You could talk about electric hot water heaters, right? I mean, we have this kind of double peak in the wintertime. The worst of those is the morning, right? Sun is not up. It's really cold. Everybody wants hot water in the morning. They want to get a shower. They want to have their coffee and their tea. And we see this big spike. So if you have an electric hot water heater, and we are a state that is 60% electric, only 35 to 40% of homes have natural gas. So you could actually preheat that water, make sure that you're doing it during a time when the system is not stressed. So electric hot water heaters, you can look at pool pumps, like anything, even refrigerators. A lot of people scoff at that when they're like, do not turn off my refrigerator. Your refrigerator's usually turned off, right? The compressor comes on to cool in a spiky kind of a fashion. The only thing you care about is that when you open that door, it's cold in there and everything hasn't spoiled. So just having that compressor not run during that 1 or 2 hour period when we're about to go into blackouts could be a big deal, right? So I think there's just a massive potential for this. And I'll just say one more thing about this, Becky, if I can. So, you know, the chairman was just talking about chairman of the PUC, Thomas Gleason, was just talking about trying to put some oxygen into some of the other discussions because everything's been about Winter Storm Uri. And I understand what he's saying. Obviously, he understands. He was executive director of the PUC at the time. He understands how big Winter Storm Uri is. But the fact of the matter is 90 to 95%, it actually might be higher, a little bit higher than 95% of outages don't happen because of the bulk power system. They happen on the distribution grid, right? They happen because there's high winds or there's ice or there's a hurricane or there's, right? I mean, we've had so many of these. Hurricane Beryl just this year in Texas, right? The ice storm that affected Central Texas, not just Austin Energy, but a lot of the co-ops and other utilities in the area. The derechos, one hit Dallas-Fort Worth, one hit Houston during 2024. Power goes out sometime for days at a time. Anything you do on the bulk grid, Texas Energy Fund, like adding extra payments, to get even higher than $5,000 a megawatt hour, none of that matters on the distribution grid. And that's where 95% of the outages happen. So for that's really where solar and storage and even solar storage gas, if you're talking about a context of a nursing home or a fire department or a hospital or a communication tower, I could go on, right? Any of these critical facilities, water treatment plant that just must be up during these events. If you have those distributed resources there, you have a resiliency benefit. And one of the big questions I think we've got to answer in the state of Texas, and I think this needs to be answered everywhere, how do we value that? How do you literally value it? Like, how do you actually put a dollar amount on the resiliency benefit? Because right now we've got this great thing, and I'm a big fan of it, the Aggregated Distributed Energy Resource Task Force. I've done several podcasts on it. I love that it's happening. Most of what they're talking about is how to get ancillary service payments to those distributed energy resources. That's a small sliver of the market and a tiny sliver of the value that those resources actually give to Texans, to the state, not just to the market, but to people. So how do we value those and actually put some money towards that so that more people can then afford them? And we get into kind of a virtuous cycle where we get more and more of them out there.
You know, it reminds me of Pacific Northwest National Lab did a study in 2023 about the value of DERs, and they modeled it on the ERCOT grid. And so they actually had some quantitative data on that, which $3
to $5 billion per year in savings to the market if you value all of those sort of stacked benefits.
Yeah. So speaking of billions of dollars, we heard Chair Gleason throw out a big $7 billion. We're talking about the potential of billions of dollars. You think about the CapEx that we're looking at with build out both in the transmission level and the distribution level. That's going to be all on the back of ratepayers and taxpayers. And couple that with the inflation that we're still feeling for, however long that tail lasts. How are we going to afford all this? Because there's more and more people that are having a harder time.
Yeah. Chairman Gleason talked about there used to be a fund that would help low-income Texans. It was called the System Benefit Fund, and he's talking about potentially the need for something like that. Vice Chair of State Affairs in the House, Ana Hernandez, just filed a bill to do something like that. I think that's very important because we do see, depending on the month and the year, somewhere around 50% of Texans are having to choose, as you know, and thank you for your leadership in starting the Texas Energy Poverty Research Institute. 50% of Texans are choosing between food, medicine, and power, and that's just not acceptable. I do think there's a clear tie-in there to energy efficiency too, right? The one-time bill assistance is vital and needed. And if you can then connect that to energy efficiency programs, then those folks are not just getting one-time assistance, but they're actually being helped, to reduce their energy bill throughout the year in and year out. So that's one of the ways. I definitely think renewable energy has had a big impact on folks' bills. There was a study out of UT Energy Institute, Josh Rhodes, who spoke earlier today at the Texas Energy Summit, that he did that showed $31 billion in savings to the market over the period of a decade from renewables. And that was before we had the kind of solar boom we have right now. So there are some proposals out there now because early bills are being filed. And there was one last session that made it all the way through the Senate that would put really onerous permitting on renewables. If we do that, it's going the other way. Bills are going to go up a lot. So renewables are one of those ways. Energy efficiency is one of those ways. And then I do think we need to start talking about how we allocate costs within the system, because there's just lots of ways that industrial customers benefit that residential customers can't access. And we need to equalize that and give residential customers the chance to participate in things like demand response programs, famously Bitcoin miners, but also really like any sort of manufacturing facility can take advantage of demand response incentives. Residential customers, small business owners need the ability to do that as well.
So we have about 8 minutes left, and I wonder if we could do 3 things quickly. Number one is how do you get started, and how do you excel in this industry?
Well, I don't know that I've excelled in this industry. I don't know if I'm in a position to give advice, but since you asked me to give advice, I'll give advice. I would say a couple of different things. Number one, and I just did a podcast with Dr. David Spence from University of Texas Law School, and his book is called Climate of Contempt. And one of the things he talks about in there is active listening, like really hone that as a skill, ask a lot of questions, never be afraid to ask the stupid question, because if you don't, like everything that follows it, you're not going to understand. So say, stop, explain that to me. I've done that throughout my career. I don't mind appearing stupid if at the end of that I'm smarter. Read a lot, right? I think it's a Truman quote. Truman said, all readers aren't leaders, but all leaders are readers. I really do believe that's true. Read widely. And yeah, I think, as part of that, as you're reading, like really like have a philosophy, have an ethic, because those things are grounding, right? I mean, this is a difficult thing to be, working in this space right now. There's all kinds of challenges, especially like those that are like working on climate change, and you're constantly seeing these, emissions have to do these dramatic drops and things like that. So I think really having that sort of, I named my company Stoic Energy because I really like Stoic philosophy, and that like the obstacle is the way, that like whatever's standing in the way is actually the way to progress. Having that kind of philosophy and that kind of grounding, I think really helps too.
So you are a leader and you're a prolific.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Dana, for the opportunity. Thanks so much, Becky. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Energy Capital Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please like, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, have a great day.